Hello and welcome to the first episode of Mayor Brown's video series, At the Crossroads, CFTC and DOJ Enforcement. My name is Matt Kluchenek, a member of Mayor Brown's litigation and dispute resolution practice and its derivatives and government enforcement groups. I'm joined by my partner, Glen Kopp, a former federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York and a member of Mayor Brown's white collar defense practice group. Each week, our goal is to cover a timely topic that involves the intersection of the CFTC and the DOJ. This week, we're going to discuss insider trading in the commodities and derivatives markets.
So Matt, given that, why don't you, if you could, give us a sense of where things stand from the CFTC perspective in enforcing insider trading in the commodities markets?
Sure. So things have come a long way very, very quickly. The general notion in the commodities markets has always been insiders can trade on their own proprietary information. Think about it in the context of a large producer, wheat, corn, energy, whatever the case may be. In order to hedge its exposures in the physical commodity via the futures markets, it necessarily has to rely upon its own inside information. And so that's okay. That's never been an issue. Where the issue is when someone trades on material, non-public information that has been obtained by virtue of a breach of a duty or through fraud or deception. That's where things become problematic and can be the basis of an enforcement action by the CFTC.
And Matt, that sounds familiar to securities trading and in the insider trading space there. There's a couple of theories. There's classic insider trading in securities law, but there's also the misappropriation theory that comes out of the Dirks and O'Hagan cases. Can you explain how that's applied, or if that's even applied in this commodities context?
Yeah, and it really does, right? Because as some of us may know, the CFTC's tools here, prosecutorial tools, Rule 180.1, which flows from Commodity Exchange Act Section 6C1, is based upon Rule 10b-5. And so there's some similarity there. And I think the CFTC has probably thought that insider trading prosecutions have been underrepresented, quite frankly, in these markets. We really haven't seen an insider trading case in the commodities markets for up until the last couple of years. It had been many, many years before we saw one. So the CFTC has tools available, 180.1, some other ones. And so I think that's really, from a CFTC perspective, thrust things into the spotlight. And maybe fair to say, Glenn, with respect to the Department of Justice and underrepresentation, they've seen as well. And so perhaps they're becoming more aggressive too.
That's exactly right, Matt. I mean, up until last year, they had not brought any of those kinds of cases under Rule 180.1 in the commodity space for insider trading. I think we've come really to expect insider trading to be in the securities arena. But now that's changed. Last year, DOJ brought two cases against energy traders, one for conspiracy to violate the Commodities Exchange Act, Rule 180.1, as well as wire fraud. And then the second case, sort of a companion case, both of which were brought in parallel with the CFTC. And the second case was a conspiracy to violate the commodities fraud statute and the wire fraud statute. And interestingly, on those two cases, they both had pleas, guilty pleas. One of them, however, appears to have had a guilty plea that was tied to a cooperation agreement, meaning that defendant is working with the government to provide them with information to bring further cases in the hopes of getting sort of a break from the judge at sentencing. That would be James, John Ed James, who's the second defendant charged in the two DOJ cases. And what that triggers, or what that seems to trigger to the market, is that there is more to come. It's possible that James cooperated only against Schultz, who was the tipper in the tippy-tipper relationship with regard to the flow of confidential information in those cases. But it's possible also that Schultz is now cooperating because his plea agreement is not accessible yet. So that means that maybe There's a reason why that happens sometimes. It's because someone is cooperating and DOJ may not want others to know about that. Also because the James sentencing has now been pushed to after Schultz's sentencing. And oftentimes you have a cooperator sentenced after the defendant in which they cooperate against is sentenced.
So it seems more to come with respect to those cases. And you have to know, we all see how closely and successfully the CFTC and the DOJ have worked together, right? They've got a great recipe with the spoofing manipulation cases where they've been working together very closely for a couple of years. Probably no surprise that we're seeing them branch out beyond spoofing and manipulation to things like insider trading in the commodities markets and no doubt other areas as well as we look into the pipelines of investigations and see what they're focused on. So that has been a really, really valuable recipe working so closely together. And it sounds like no abatement anytime in the near future.
I would agree, Matt. And given that, what kind of advice do you have for folks in the commodities market for how they can prepare for these kinds of investigations, but more importantly, how they can avoid these kinds of investigations and interests from DOJ?
Sure. So what's the next step? And, it's like when you review procedures and policies, every company now, every market participant has loads and loads of these, right? But, while they'll have, with respect to insider trading, at least, extraordinarily robust securities insider trading policies on the commodity side, there may be nothing, or there may be a very small amount. Very few companies have robust commodities insider trading policies. So issue number one, really, or task number one, if you will, is to beef up those policies or create some policies and procedures really focused on the recent prosecutions that we're seeing in the commodities markets with respect to insider trading. And then number two, of course, policies and procedures are useful, but you've got to have training. Employees need to understand what they can, what they can't do. Where's the line of demarcation? We've seen, in fact, a number of CFTC cases that have involved employees misappropriating their employer information, things like futures orders, and trading on that information in their own personal accounts. And that's, again, been the basis for enforcement investigations and resolutions. So really just beefing all that stuff up clearly will go a long way in the CFTC space. I assume, Glenn, with respect to DOJ, clearly has a huge potential benefit there as well.
Absolutely. You want to root out those problems right away, and you also want to create a culture of compliance, a culture in which you're proud to show to DOJ, if they ever came looking, that if there is a bad actor in your space, it's aberrant behavior for the firm itself, and avoid any further problems for the firm broader than just the individual actor.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Glenn. And most importantly, thanks to all of you for watching this short video, quick hit, if you will, on insider trading. Our goal is to cover a timely topic every week, and we hope to see you next week. Thank you.